Hello, and welcome to the second episode of HUPS Interviews. Today I'm joined by Dr H Snelling, an applied physicist from the Department of Physics here at the University of Hull. Thank you for joining us, Dr Snelling.
Thank you for the invitation, Alex. We're pleased to be here.
You're welcome. First, I'd just like to ask how you're doing in these uncertain times. You holding up okay?
Yeah, not too bad. I've been mainly working at home, but I have a good internet connection and I can do some of my research remotely, and I've been staying in touch with students, so it's been fine. Yeah.
That sounds good. It's nice to hear that you're doing well. Um, as we did with Dr Buzzer, I'd just like to start off if you could talk a bit about your early life, where you went to school, and whether you were interested in science from an early age, and maths, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I grew up in Surrey, sort of South London area
Mm,
near
yeah,
Kingston, and yeah, I always liked sort of building things and making things, and I suppose quite early on, people say to you when you're a kid, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I used to say, oh, an inventor. And I suppose when I was that was probably when I was about 5 or 6. I thought this idea of being an inventor was a great thing. And then when I realised, sort of towards the end of my degree, and when I started my research career, that effectively what I meant as a kid was what I was doing. I was sort of coming up with ideas, building things, getting them to work, doing new things people hadn't done before. And I thought, yeah, actually, this is what I wanted to do. I wouldn't call myself an inventor now. It's not the right word, but
mm,
it kind of what I meant by that as a kid was definitely where I ended up. So it was good. So yeah, I mean, I grew up in that area, sort of just outside South London. It's a very nice place to be. And yeah, had a very happy childhood, and but concentrated on practical things, and
yeah.
building and that sort of work.
Um, so were you interested in lasers specifically from quite a young age then, or were they not around at that time, or?
Thank you, Alex. Thank you.
Sorry.
The Yeah, the no, I am younger than the laser. So my interest in lasers really goes back to sixth form, and it was not really a deliberate thing. I was very much interested in the physics and building things in technology and engineering, and I was thinking about what course I wanted to do at university, and this is pre-internet, and so we used to send off for prospectuses in the post, and they'd come through, and you'd look through them. And I gradually became aware of this style of physics called applied physics, which was at the engineering end of physics. And I thought, yeah, that suits me better. I wasn't sure whether to do engineering. I was quite interested in aeronautical engineering, but at school we didn't do engineering, we did physics, and so
Yeah.
this applied physics idea made more sense. And I was off school unwell, and during the day they used to show the open university programs, and I was starting to think, I'd do applied physics but perhaps with some speciality. And while I was off sick, I was watching these open university programs, and there was one on lasers, and I thought, that's it, that's what I want, applied physics with lasers. And when you went through the different universities and said, who offers a course with applied physics with lasers, I'd managed to make it specific enough that there was only Hull and perhaps a couple of others that had similar courses, but certainly Hull stuck out as it was called Applied Physics with Laser Technology 3-year BSc degree, and so
Hmm.
that's what I wanted to do.
That sounds very specific kind of
Yeah,
degree.
yeah. Mm.
um, I just thought now, I remember you telling me that you had to have an interview when you first applied. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, yeah. So the system was the same. You applied to five, so you had your top five choices, and then they would invite you for an interview if they were interested in you. and you'd go along, and your offer would be based on your performance at that interview. So I went for interview at Bath and Cardiff and Hull and a couple of other places, and I got offers from places,
Mm-hmm.
but really it was being in Hull and seeing the environment that was on offer, which didn't change for decades. You know, it was always a friendly place. It was always a place where people were welcome. People could just come and try and do their best and just have a go at things. And the enthusiasm of the students and the liveliness of the campus and that speciality in lasers really kind of pulled me into the place. And my interview, um, well, the interview I had with Professor Dyer, who's retired from the department now, but he became my personal tutor when I joined the department, and then he became my PhD supervisor, and
Mm-hmm.
then he became my boss and head of department. So I've known him for a long time. And but he did my interview on that day, and you were sent off into members of staff's offices. All the staff were involved, and he sat me down and said, "What are you doing at the moment at school?" And I said, "Oh, we're doing optics." He said, "Oh, anything particular in optics?" I said, "Oh, young slit experiment." And he said, "Oh, fantastic." And of course, I find out later that he's an internationally renowned optical physicist. So of course, I delighted upon something that he's an expert in himself. So he handed me the chalk because he had a chalkboard in his office and said, "Please go ahead and derive the equations for the young slits interference." And so that was my interview. I had to sort of stand at the board and derive the
Wow.
equation for that.
The humble beginnings of your time at
Yeah.
university.
Well, it was early as well because I was still 17 when I went to university. So when I arrived in Hull as an undergraduate, I was still 17. And I was talking to someone about it today, actually, and they said, "Well, how did you get served in the Union Bar?" Well, the thing was, once they gave you a union card, we used to get these sort of membership of the students' union cards.
Yeah.
Once you had one, they just assumed you must be over 18, so nobody ever questioned it.
Were you quite small back then, or did you look 18? Do you think, or?
Um, I don't know. I was always tall.
Mm.
I much skinnier, but yeah, I was always quite tall.
Um. Well, staying on that topic, can you tell us a bit more about your undergraduate days? Some of the stuff you got up to, some of the clubs you went out to.
Um, well, you see, I suppose the interesting thing from this interview is that probably it'll mainly be watched by Hull graduates and Hull students at the moment.
Yeah.
And as a Hull graduate myself, it does mean that a lot of the places that were my haunts as a student are probably still there and still where students go.
Mm.
But I think my earliest memories were I was in the lawns as an undergraduate in the first year,
Yeah.
and when the year before I went to university, they still had separate sex accommodation at the lawns, so there were male halls and female halls. And the year that I went, they decided to mix everything, and there was still a few, so half a dozen women who wanted single sexed accommodation who were staying on. So they said, okay, we'll make Lambert Hall E block all female
Mhm.
and everything else is mixed. And when I turned up, it turned out they were overbooked with male students, so they had to put two of us into E block. So we we ended up being the only two blokes, me and my roommate, because you had to share rooms as well. So you're suddenly thrown into a room with someone you've never met before,
Yeah.
um, and uh, and then you've got a academic year, sharing a room with someone that you don't know. When you're the only two blokes in a block of 27 people, so it was that kind of, well, I think it made the atmosphere a bit more sophisticated, shall we say, than some of the all male blocks.
I'm sure you weren't complaining about it though.
No, and I'm still in touch with most of those people. You know,
Mm.
we did have it was a good year. That was a good year.
Yeah, we're not open anymore. The lawns are closed a
No,
year or so ago, I think. Yeah,
yeah. So some
sadly.
people won't know the lawns, but I suppose from there, um, we used to myself and a friend we used to have a radio show on the university radio station, and we used to sort of interview bands and things, and then that meant we would go and see quite a lot of the new bands at the New Adelphi Club on De Grey Street,
Yeah,
and of course Spiders at the weekend, and the Welly, which is just closed as well, which is a bit sad. But yeah,
yeah.
mind you, the Welly was, you know, had lino tiles on the floor and it was very sticky. 50p for a bottle of Nuki Brown. You know, it
I
was
have no idea what a Nuki Brown is.
it's a type of bottled beer, Alex. It's a Newcastle Brown.
Uh,
It's a very heavy glass bottle that you don't want someone to hit you with. No.
no, I think they've done away with most of them in clubs these days. It's all plastic
Yeah,
bottles.
yeah, it was different times. There was a spate of them just opening new nightclubs in Hull fairly regularly, and me and my wife, we you know she wasn't my wife then, but we used to try and always go to the opening night of new nightclubs because um, people would it wouldn't yet have a particular clientele. You could just go and find out what it was like.
Mm.
And so there was one that opened at the end of George Street, that they decided to have a slide between the upstairs dance floor and the downstairs dance floor. And so when we arrived, we saw this slide and we thought, well, this is where you need to sit and watch what happens later on in the night. And sure enough, they very quickly found out they needed a bouncer at the top to get people's glasses off them before they tried to go down the slide with a pint of beer. So, but that club didn't last long.
Mm.
Um,
Sounds very novel.
yeah, no, there was lots of sort of niche ones. There was one on Albion Street called Club Sahara, which had sphinxes and pyramids and things. And then they changed hands and they called it Hollywood Nights. And they just took they had sort of posters of Mickey Mouse and just stuck them on the face of the Sphinx and just sort of overnight changed it from an Egyptian theme to a Hollywood theme. It was that was bad as well. But
So this was late 80s?
yeah, late 80s.
Did you have like a big flowing hair and jazzy shirts? And
Uh, no, I was always a bit of a jeans and jumper kind of guy. But we were more. I think it's come to mean something else. We were more independent kind of bands and that sort of thing. But
hmm.
more the Spiders crowd. It was like sort of black uh, jackets and
Yeah.
black trousers and yeah, fairly dark stuff. All the glitzy sort of big 80s hair. They went to a club called Peppermint Park, which then became Lexington Avenue, and that was quite a different place. It had fountains with lights in them and things.
It sounds like you had a good time in your
It
undergraduate
was
days.
it, it was a great time.
Did you
Yeah,
did you find time to study in amongst all of that?
I passed my degree. Yeah, which is how I get the job I've got now. So yeah, I did enough work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, staying on the topic of work now, you were awarded a PhD scholarship in 1989 to develop photo-switched gas lasers. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah. So I finished my degree in applied physics with laser technology, and I had a summer job that year, um, working in the teaching lab, developing experiments.
Mm.
And so I was around in Hull over the summer, and there were various sort of projects coming along, and Pete Dyer, Professor Dyer, approached me and said that a company had been to see him, talk to him about developing a new laser, and they wanted to sponsor a student, and would I be interested in doing that? And and at the same time, I'd been for a job with the same company, and they basically, in the interview, they said, look, you've got a choice. You can either join the company, have a proper paid job, or you can stay in Hull and do a PhD developing our next laser. So I thought, actually, I wanted to do the research, I wanted to do the PhD, and I thought, this is brilliant. They're going to pay, and then I'll have 3 years doing that, and more than likely, I can join the company then anyway.
Yeah.
So it was an easy decision to make. But the laser itself, these were gas lasers, and so you excite the gas by pulse current going through what we call a gas discharge. And so you have a capacitor bank, you charge that probably to about 30,000 volts, and then you close a high voltage switch, and that closes the circuit, and you put about a kiloamp of current through the gas to excite it to get laser action in a pulse, in a very short pulse. And the difficulty with this is the high voltage switch. They're expensive, and you need ancillary circuits to run them. And so, and they've got to withstand 30,000 volts and kiloamp currents through them. So they wondered if they could build a laser without the switch. So we designed and built one and did the research on using the main gas discharge itself as the switch, and that worked well. So we managed to produce a new way of exciting the gas in a gas laser.
Sounds good.
Yeah, no, it was great because a lot of it was high voltage work, and that was always quite exciting in the lab when you're trying to make pulse circuits of 30,000 volts. I think that the highest voltage circuit I made was 100,000 volts, which was a charge to 30 kilovolts, and then it triples as you fire the circuit. And that lets out a very large electromagnetic pulse if it's not shielded properly, which when you're doing research, you tend not to put boxes around things too much. And I was working in the dark, and I noticed a little flashing light in the corner. And by induction through this electromagnetic pulse, the gas bottles were charging up enough to have a spark go between them. So there's little sparks between those big metal cylinders you see outside the labs and things. We even blew up a light bulb in a table lamp that wasn't plugged in. Someone had left the flex coiled up on the bench, and that acted like an aerial, and we managed to take out the light bulb with that. So that high voltage pulse power work was quite good fun. Yeah. So once you've done a PhD, then you are postdoctoral. So you have your doctorate. So the next stage of an academic career tends to be postdoctoral research. So again, I was in that sort of position of, do I want to go into industry, work with laser companies, or stay and do academic research?
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to be offered one of the first European Union framework programs to work on laser safety of fume. So when the lasers interact with materials, you're obviously generating plumes of gas and particles. And there was concern at the time as to, well, what are people breathing in when they're doing this processing? So that work kind of transitioned me from building lasers into using them to process things. And that's really been most of my work from then on, has been using lasers in different ways and studying how intense light fields interact with matter.
Yeah, sounds like important work. Safety
It's been,
and stuff like
yeah.
that. Yeah.
It has a real mix of level of importance, because we've done we've been involved in some medical applications, activating cancer drugs, looking at not myself but colleagues in the group have looked at corneal sculpting for eye surgery. So there's been sort of real medical applications that are obviously very important. We've done things in display technologies which people are using now in mobile phones and lots of other things. And then at the other end, people ring up and say, can you brown mashed potato with a laser? So we've done that as well. that we went through a period of time when anybody who rang the university with a crackpot idea wouldn't just get put through to the physics department; they'd be put through specifically to the laser group, and inevitably you would come to me. And so we did a number of, um, you know, making artificial lightning for films about pigeons and um, all sorts of things. Yeah, I know we've got a limited amount of time, but I could go through.
Well, interesting if nothing else.
Yeah, yeah. No. This is what's been great about the work over the years is in the research labs. We used to have what we used to call Friday afternoon experiments because you'd spend all week working hard on solving the problems that were part of the project, and then as you're doing that, there would be plenty of times you'd say, "Oh, I wonder what would happen if."
Mm.
And so on Friday afternoons, we'd allow ourselves a bit of time to, find out what would happen if you drilled a hole in a beaker full of alcohol with a laser, would it ignite the alcohol as it came out the hole? That sort of thing. And you learn things. It's useful.
Yeah, it sounds really good. Um, in 2001, you were appointed as a lecturer at the University of Hull. Was lecturing something you found came naturally to you?
Yeah, well, that might be for other people to judge, but I'd been involved in the teaching lab before then because one of the members of staff had been seconded into a different role, and there was a sort of a gap in delivering the first year labs. So although I wasn't a lecturer, I was a postdoctoral researcher. The department asked me if I would fill in on a Friday afternoon in the first year lab, and that well, it seems a long time ago, and that's mainly because it really was a long time ago. And so I've been Fridays in first year labs since then, and so when the lectureship came up, that was a competitive process. There were applicants from all around the country and internationally, so it was something that I was quite nervous about because I wanted to stay in Hull,
Yeah.
and getting a lectureship would allow me to do that and allow me to develop my own research. And I wasn't unhappy about taking on the teaching role because I enjoyed the teaching lab. I hadn't really done much lecturing at that point. But I was successful in securing that post. And the first thing they wanted me to do was to set up an MSc, a taught MSc in laser processing. So colleagues had got the funding. Professor Dyer, David Sands, Phil Key had got funding for this taught MSc, and part of that funding paid for a new member of staff to deliver the course. So that's how I got that post, was really to do a taught MSc, which is quite nice because there's small groups and teaching something that you know very well because it's your research. And then that developed more into undergraduate teaching over a period of years.
Hmm. So, I think I'm right in saying that taught MSc program ended in 2008.
That would be about right, yeah.
Well, what was the reason for that? Was it just not really relevant anymore? Or...
No, I think it was relevant. We had funding for scholarships, and at the time, the government didn't have a process by which you could borrow money to do career development. So what we really found was when the money was no longer available, you could pick up a few overseas students who were sponsored by their governments, but UK students couldn't really afford to do it.
Yeah.
And and getting sponsorship from companies, it was quite difficult at that time. So I think it was not really it definitely wasn't the course content, and it definitely wasn't the fact that the industry didn't want people trained in those skills. It was more, how would it be funded? How would students support themselves?
Mm. It's unfortunate that it came to an end like that.
Well, it evolved into a more general MSc
Mm.
in
Yeah. Ryan Mitchell
yeah.
asked if Hull's physics department is involved in any renewable energy projects, through my
Mhm.
own research, I have found that you are involved in an offshore wind farm project.
Yeah,
Can you
yeah.
tell us about the project?
Yeah, I can. The You probably know in Hull we have the Siemens Gamesa factory for building the wind turbine blades.
Yeah.
It's an amazing place. If you get a chance to visit, definitely go and visit, because these blades are enormous. There's 70, 80 meter long blades, and they're in molds, and they have to have the same amount of space to draw them out of the mold afterwards and things. So it's a massive operation.
Yeah.
And as part of that, they have a very high value, and they want to be able to monitor the manufacturing process and also monitor the response of the blade and how it's aging when it's out in the North Sea. And so with colleagues in engineering, so Professor Jim Gilbert in engineering, put together a proposal that said, we'll look at how we would monitor these blades during manufacture, during transportation, and during service. And so there's some experts in engineering in control theory, and Ron Patton is looking at the control theory, but he needs signals to work from. And so we're looking at embedding fiber optic sensors into the blades themselves. Obviously, they're susceptible to lightning strikes and electrical interference. So, using an optical technique to measure the stress, strain, and temperature of the blade is an interesting idea. So, we've got a 5-year project with Siemens and with University of Sheffield, Durham, and looking at putting that sort of technology into a composite structure.
This is still very much ongoing research.
Yes, yeah, it's running at the moment. Yeah,
Mm. So, sticking with that, do you have any other ongoing research at the moment as well?
yeah. Well, one of the things that's emerged from all the different materials that we've looked at how laser light interacts with is that glass is applied in many different applications, and so the idea of how do you cut, machine, modify glasses with lasers is a sort of recurring theme, and one that we have quite a long track record in Hull. It's part of it as part of my PhD thesis as well, about how you induce different stress strain states in glass by laser interaction. And that really led to the fact that uh, uh, Professor Sir Michael Berry, who's quite a famous theoretical physicist, mathematical physicist, he's known for the Berry phase, and so he's made contributions to quantum mechanics and to optics and many different fields. Um, he approached me to say he'd got this theory of how you could form optical surfaces that had different um, uh, focusing abilities. So this is a sort of prefocal brightening, he terms it, or Laplacian imaging. But the surfaces need a very careful control in being able to machine them, and there isn't really a way of doing that at the moment. And someone had suggested to him that perhaps laser processing could do that, and someone else, and I still haven't found out who, said you ought to talk to Howard in Hull about processing glass. So thank you to whoever pointed Professor Sir Michael in my direction, but we wrote a proposal together and put it into the Leave Hume Trust, and that funded a project that we're just about wrapping up now, about machining glass surfaces to make Laplacian optics.
Oh, sounds really interesting, but maybe a bit too much for my astro brain to understand.
It's just the second derivative of the surface. It's fine.
So, moving on, you have a first year tutor here at Hull. Um, and being so, you may be the first academic contact that some new students have. Do you feel any pressure from this to give a good impression of the university?
I think that the nice thing about working at Hull is that you don't have to shoulder these things on your own, you know. So yeah, I might be an early point of contact, but they've gone through an admission system, which means they will have met Martin Buzzer. They will have come on open days and met Brad Gibson, and they will have encountered all the other members of staff. You know, I'm just picking out a few names, but you know them all, and so there is a bit of responsibility to guide people in those first few weeks, be open and someone and approachable. But I suppose I don't really feel the pressure of it because I'm part of a team, and they're a good team, and it works really well. And it changes and things, and uh, Elke Rodiger is now Director of Studies in Physics. So she's taken an overview of all the physics programs. And then we act as a team sort of with her. So she leads the teaching team. And then there's each of us doing different year groups. So I think that is how we've decided to do it in physics, and it seems to work well.
Do you enjoy being the first year tutor?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I think the research is fun, but it's quite pressured. And but I think actually interacting with the students is a great joy, and one that when you know it does feel like you're doing something positive. And I hope the students that I've interacted with mostly feel that. Sometimes you have to be a bit of a parent, so you can't expect to be liked all the time. But most of the time, we're learning together. I'm still trying to get my head around a lot of different concepts and learn things. And it's actually teaching them to someone else is a very good way to learn them yourself. And so I've learned a lot of physics because I've had to explain it to someone else, and that
Yeah.
I enjoy. And yeah, so yeah, I have a lot of very good memories of and stories of times in the teaching lab. Yeah, and tutorials. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I'm sure you've helped many, many students throughout the years, Howard. I think a lot of people appreciate the work you've done. Um, talking about people, we're gonna go on to a few questions we have from the Physics Society past and present members.
okay.
Holly Dervey would like to pay
Hello.
tribute to you being an absolute veteran of the physics department.
Is that a compliment, being a veteran, or did you just become a veteran by staying alive long enough? Um,
It's a compliment, definitely. And she asked you, what would you say to encourage young students to attend Hull University, in particular Southerners like yourself, and
yeah.
any young female physicists?
I think, I mean, I did get a little bit of warning about this question, and so I had time to reflect about what I was going to say about Holly, in case she watches this, but perhaps I won't. But she's a legend in our household. But to answer your question, I think what brought me here is still true about the family nature of the department, that we strive to be open, approachable, and part of a learning community where people can just discuss things and not worry about saying the wrong thing, and just have a go. And that's what we want from people, is for them to apply themselves and do their best, rather than necessarily being the next Nobel Prize winner. I think
Yeah,
people understanding something about the physical world through gaining a knowledge of physics is a great thing. And as members of staff, we're excited about that. And I think that's a good reason to study physics. And I think the environment we offer at Hull is a good one. I think the idea of making that bespoke to Southerners, well, they have their own problems, which would be better if they moved further north. Um, but also trying to make it bespoke for female students. I'm not quite sure, and I have daughters myself. They have not pursued science as a career, so obviously I have failed in trying to engender any excitement. Well, they said to me, when you do science, Dad, it's okay, but at school it's boring. So perhaps people get turned off it. I, I think actually, okay, what I think is missing is um, the message that pursuing science and physics in particular is a creative pursuit. People see science as perhaps being mechanical, as being facts and things, where in actual fact, going back to what I said right at the beginning about the idea of perhaps wanting to be an inventor, that people will take the word an inventor or an invention as being a creative process. And what
Definitely.
I've learned over the years is that actually pursuing science is a creative process. And so I think perhaps that's the message I'd want to send to people is don't think of science as facts and figures and mechanical rote learning and just applying rules.
Yeah.
It actually is a set of tools that allows you to be creative.
Sounds very profound.
Right.
James Wade
Yes,
uh,
hello.
says that you are a man of many talents. I'm not sure if he's mistaken there.
Yes,
Oh.
yeah.
But
What
do
does
you
that
have
mean?
any hidden skills? Skills away from the laboratory?
Well, away from the I don't know what away from the laboratory means. The laboratory is my life. So any any skills that I have are almost certainly lab based. Um, the I can turn a Rizzler paper into a propeller quite well. Have you seen that? Have I done that for you, Alex?
You've never done that for me.
No. Well, okay. Well, when we're all back on campus, perhaps if we find some dubious student who's got a packet of Rizzler papers, I'll show you how to make a spinning propeller from it, and then we can have a race. Okay.
So that is your
I don't.
hidden skill.
Is that a hidden skill? I don't know. I can store elastic energy. Have I? I might have shown you this one though. This. Do you want to see this?
Yeah.
Is this suitable for your YouTube video? That I'll, I'll do it. I need to raise my hand up onto a platform. Okay. So I've got some books. I'll turn them this way so you can't see what they are. I'm just going to angle my camera a little bit differently. There you go. Okay, so there's my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Have I shown you this, Alex? And if you turn your thumb like this, so you can try this at home yourself, you have to keep turning it, and it gradually increases the elastic energy that you're storing into these tendons and things. And as you find it's starting to it gets stiffer. So you have to sort of like really press. And then once you've got it there, you let go. There you go. So that's how you can store elastic energy. Yeah. Does that count as a hidden talent? I think I've broken Alex. It was my mission.
I'm a broken man.
Okay.
One last question, and this is one you haven't seen yet, so
Okay.
kind of going off the script here. Goro
Yeah.
asks, "What is the meaning of life?"
Ah. Well, I think. Well, yeah. You see, I haven't got a silly answer for that one. I think there are mottos to live your life by, but I don't think that gives you any meaning. I think it's a personal thing, the meaning of life. Um, I think I think a solitary life is not one that would suit me. I think actually feeling like you're doing something for other people, that you're having an
Mm.
impact on other people's lives, a sense of community. I think community is a key thing. Um, but then that makes me an old socialist, you see.
No, I think it's a good answer. It's definitely stuff to take away from that. And
But Doro, if you're looking for mottos to live your life by, one of the key ones is don't eat the yellow snow.
and stop drinking a bottle of wine every night in the university bar.
I, well, I know you're not referring to me because I don't drink.
Referring to Goro there. Anyway, that's it. No more questions from me. Is there anything you'd like to say, Dr. Snelling?
Uh, no, I don't know who's going to watch this. And I hope that you don't feel that it's been a waste of your time.
Uh, I hope so as well. Yep, so
Okay,
that concludes our interview. Thank you for watching. Again, massive thanks to Dr. Snelling for being here with us today. And
my
that's
pleasure.
it. Goodbye.
Bye.